Welcome to the Explainer. If you're a focused learner studying for your religious studies GCSEs, well, you are in exactly the right place. Today, we're bringing a ton of energy to a highly specific, honestly fascinating topic. We are going to master the exact steps, the strict rules, and the really deep theology behind the Jewish process of divorce. So get your notebooks ready because by the end of this explainer, you are going to have a crystal clear understanding of the halachic process. Okay, let's dive into this with a question that really gets right to the heart of the matter. Is a civil divorce enough? I mean, picture this. A married couple decides to part ways. They go through the local legal system, they sign all the government paperwork, and they end up with an entire filing cabinet full of civil divorce documents. You'd think they're officially divorced, right? Well, here's the crazy thing. In the eyes of Jewish law, despite all that paperwork, and honestly, no matter how long they've been separated, that couple is still 100% married. So we've got a fundamental difference here between civil and halachic divorce. Now, to be totally accurate, Jewish law absolutely requires you to follow the law of the land. So yes, a civil divorce is definitely necessary. But, and this is a massive but for your exam notes, a civil divorce simply cannot serve as a substitute for a halachic divorce. You know, a divorce that completely conforms to the strictures of traditional Jewish law. You need something more. To make sure you can organize your notes perfectly, here's our game plan for today. First, this civil divorce problem. Second, what is a get? Third, drafting the document. Fourth, the step-by-step ceremony. Fifth, the rules of consent. And sixth, life after the divorce. 6 clear steps, let's get right to it. Section 1, the civil divorce problem and the theology of the union of souls. Why exactly does that civil paperwork fall so short? So the crucial theological point is this quote right here. God, who prescribed a formula for the fusion of souls, also gave instructions how 2 souls can be severed. In Judaism, marriage isn't just some legal agreement between 2 people that you can just tear up at will. It's way deeper than that. It's deeply theological. It's a divine union of souls. The exact same God who gave the precise formula to fuse those souls together beneath the wedding canopy also provided highly detailed, specific instructions on how those 2 souls can revert to a state of independence. That specific formula brings us to Section 2, what is a get and its biblical foundation. The main star of this whole process is a get. That's the Aramaic word for the actual document of divorce that's transmitted from the husband to the wife. And here is the absolutely critical part to remember. It legally affects the dissolution of a Jewish marriage. According to biblical law, a married couple is released from the bonds of matrimony only through the transmission of this specific bill of divorce. It doesn't just act as proof that a divorce happened so they can remarry later. No, the document itself literally creates the divorce. Now, for your GCSE studies, you absolutely need to know where this strict process comes from. The biblical foundation is found in Deuteronomy 24, verses 1 and 2. It says, "When a man takes a wife, he writes for her a document of severance, gives it into her hand, and sends her away from his house." This ancient text forms the literal blueprint for everything we are talking about today. Moving right along to Section 3, drafting the document and the strict rules involved, because this isn't just any ordinary piece of paper. Now, what's really interesting about this is how insanely customized the process is. The get has to be written by an expert scribe who acts as the husband's agent. And here's the kicker. Each document is individually tailored to the specific divorcing couple. You cannot just jump online, print a blank form, and fill in the blanks. That is strictly precluded. The husband has to express an unqualified intention to sever ties, and it must be entirely bespoke for him and his wife. Plus, while technically it could be written in any language if it has the right phrasing, the universally accepted Jewish custom is to write the whole thing in Aramaic. And then there's the actual formatting of the document. It relies heavily on the number 12. It's an age-old tradition that the get is written in exactly 12 lines. Why 12? Well, 12 is the numerical value of the Hebrew letters that spell the word get. And to finalize that physical drafting, the required witnesses sign their names right beneath that 12th line. Once that document is flawlessly drafted, we transition to Section 4, the step-by-step ceremony and the essential role of the Beth Din. Okay, so what is a Beth Din? It's a rabbinical court made up of 3 rabbis. Make sure you write that term down. Technically, the only people required to be present to effect the divorce are the husband, the wife, and 2 witnesses. But practically speaking, the get process is so incredibly complex that it simply cannot be done correctly without experts. In fact, rabbinic law automatically invalidates any get that isn't written and transmitted in front of these specific professionals. The Beth Din guides the entire thing. Let's move to and see how this builds into the actual ceremony. Here is your clear, chronological 4-step process. First, the scribe writes the tailored document. Second, the husband physically hands the document to his wife. Third, 2 kosher witnesses observe this transmission. The very moment she receives it in front of them, the marriage is officially dissolved. And fourth, the Beth Din issues a confirmation certificate to both parties, making their newly single status completely official. Now, you might be thinking, well, what if the couple just literally cannot be in the same room together? Jewish law actually has a practical workaround for this. Emissaries can be appointed. The husband can appoint an agent to bring the get to his wife, or the wife can appoint an agent to accept it for her. But heads up, appointing an emissary is a halachically complex procedure all on its own. And, you guessed it, that appointment also has to happen in the presence of a Beth Din. This brings us to Section 5, the rules of consent and the absolute need for mutual agreement. For a get to actually be valid, the rabbis look incredibly closely at the mindset of the divorcing couple. Both the husband and the wife have to be completely sane, they must be totally sober-minded at the time of the divorce, and they must fully acquiesce. There has to be complete, clear-headed consent from both parties. If the document doesn't stem from a genuine, unforced desire to get divorced, the get is completely invalid. But, it wasn't always this mutual. Way back under original biblical law, the wife's consent wasn't actually required for her husband to divorce her. But about 1,000 years ago, a massive historical shift happened. A really noted German scholar named Rabbi Gershom, they called him the light of the diaspora. He stepped in. He officially prohibited a man from divorcing his wife without her approval. And that single ruling changed the halakhic landscape forever, ensuring mutual consent is required right up to this day. Finally, we reach Section 6, life after the divorce. Once the certificate is issued, how do these individuals actually move forward? The Jewish sages were incredibly pragmatic. They really understood human nature, so they set up clear boundaries to protect the former couple. Minimal contact, if any at all, is highly encouraged. The sages were worried that the comfort level and the previous intimacy they shared could easily lead to behavior that is inappropriate for an unmarried couple. They actually take this so seriously that Jewish law places restrictions on the ex-couple from residing together in the same housing complex. And this brilliantly illustrates the nuance of Jewish law, because despite all those strict physical boundaries to keep them apart post-divorce, they aren't totally forbidden from ever being together again. In fact, if they resolve their issues, it's actually considered a special mitzvah, a really good deed or commandment to remarry a divorced spouse. The system is strict, sure, but it intentionally leaves the door open for reconciliation. So we've covered the civil problem, the drafting, the Beth Din, the consent, and the aftermath. And I want to leave you with this final, really provocative thought to chew on for your exams. How does viewing marriage as a divine fusion of souls change the way we approach its dissolution? When you compare just quickly signing civil papers to this careful, 12-line, expertly witnessed halakhic process we just explored, it reveals such a profound respect for the gravity of human relationships. Think about how this theological view shapes the pure strictness of the get process, and you'll have everything you need to absolutely ace this topic. Keep learning, keep focusing, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.